rush over here and be with us today. I'm Betsy Fischer Martin, and I am the Executive Director of the Women in Politics Institute here in AU School of Public Affairs. Do we have any new people to one of our events tonight? Yay, well, welcome. So WPI is a nonprofit and nonpartisan institute here, and our mission is really to close that gender gap in political leadership. And so we offer academic courses about women in politics. We run a campaign training program to get more women to run for office. We do programs like this, we do research, and we're particularly excited to have with us tonight Senator Murkowski to talk about her new book, Far From Home, and the subtitle of this is great, An Alaska Senator Faces the Extreme Climate of Washington, D.C. And that is certainly true these days. So we're gonna get into all of that with her. She has just come from the votes and the shutdown, so we'll ask her what she has to say about that, but then we'll really get into some of the lessons that she's learned, some of the things that she wants to share to really try to inspire, I think, good people to run for office. And so we'll have a conversation about that, and we will save plenty of time for your questions as well. So if you do have a question, we have a mic that'll come around toward the end, so be thinking of what you might want to ask the senator. So with that, welcome.
Thank you, Betsy. It is great to be here, and apologies to everyone because I know you get things scheduled. One of the things that I've learned about my time in the Senate is don't fall too much in love with your schedule,
right?
Because it's going to change. And literally at 4:45, it was announced that there was going to be 4 votes. So we took another vote on the shutdown.
Same result.
Same one. This was number 12.
Number 12, right?
I believe. No difference than the first 12. And then we've got a couple different judge votes that are going on right now. But it is just an indicator, as you say, kind of an occupational hazard. So my apologies for the tardy arrival. But,
well, we're glad that you're here.
I scooted over as quick as I could.
We're glad that you're here. I want to start with the shutdown because we're on day 22.
Yep.
How do you see this resolving? I mean, we've got people that are not getting paid. We're now impacting lots of people's lives. How do you see an end to this?
Well, first of all, we have to have an end to it. I honestly believe that there are some people who say, well, there's not a big deal if there's a government shutdown. I don't really see any impact of that. And so, what's the deal? There is no good outcome from a shutdown. There is nothing good that comes from a shutdown. We don't save any money. We really don't help matters at all. What ends up happening is we start positioning,
right,
and then it becomes a matter of each side feeling like the only way out of this is if my side wins. And right now, the problem that we're at, the impasse that we're seeing is both sides think they're winning.
Right.
And when both sides think they're winning, there's no incentive to say, well, maybe this is not working. But I'll tell you, I come from a state where we are feeling the impact. It is real, it is now. We just suffered a terrible, terrible natural disaster over about a week ago that slammed the west coast of Alaska, and the president just this afternoon declared a presidential disaster. So we need our government to be working. When we call, we need to know. When we need to get a replacement Social Security card because your home has been crushed, and there's no way to get a replacement card. So these are the things that we're looking at, and we're saying, yeah, this is real. People back home are concerned that the shutdown has been going on, and now I read these headlines that SNAP benefits may not be paid after the end of October. We found the resources to get WIC payments through the end of the month. But what happens beyond that? Our military were paid, but they were only paid for one pay period. What happens beyond that? So there is no good outcome from this. So your question, I think, Betsy, was, how do we get out of it?
How do we get out of the impasse?
And the only way you end the impasse is through conversation. The only way that you end the impasse is when you're trying to work through some of these proposals with members of the other party. And so there is a...
Is that happening?
It is.
Okay.
And it has been. It has been for 22 days. But we don't have enough yet in order to kind of get us off center. The Republican position has been made very clear. We're not going to talk about what we have to do with enhanced premium tax credits until the government is open. The Democrats say we must resolve the premium tax credits or we're not going to open. And so we're trying to figure out how it might be structured. There's some kind of precipitating events that are coming up that are going to make a difference. November 1 is when people are going to get the notification as to what their insurance plans will cost them in this next open enrollment period. And some people are going to be opening that, and they're going to be shocked at what they're seeing.
Right.
That's going to motivate.
Or like the second or third paycheck is not coming in.
Second or third paycheck, because most will say, okay, I can go one pay period, I can go two pay periods, but they can't go.
But when you have a mortgage payment and other things are happening,
yeah, and so there's this accumulation. But in the meantime, people are super anxious. They're afraid. They are. They're stressed out, and when people are stressed out, bad things happen.
Yeah.
I look at some of the security people that are surrounding us there on Capitol Hill, and I talk to these guys every single day coming in. Every one of them is showing up every single day. They're working overtime, and they're not getting paid. And
TSA agents at the airport.
And they say, well, okay, we know that we're going to get paid. But then you see some of the information that comes out that says, well, maybe not everybody's going to get paid. So that compounds the anxiety. So we've got to resolve this, and we've got to resolve it yesterday.
So turning to the book, because this extreme climate that I mentioned, why did you think it's important to kind of talk about this now at this point in your career? And talk about sort of your purpose for writing the book and what you hope people will take from it.
So you have to kind of rewind a little bit. There was a precipitating event in my life, in my political life. And that was the election of 2010.
Right.
This was right at the rise of the Tea Party movement. I had been in office, I'd been elected, I'd been appointed, I'd been elected, and now I was standing for a second election. And there were things that happened, some miscues. Certainly, I did not take as seriously the strength of the Tea Party movement in my state. And there were some things that happened in the campaign. My colleague had passed in an airplane accident along with several other friends just a week prior to the election, and I stopped the campaign. Anyway, long story short, I lost the primary. And what happens when you lose a primary? You're done. You fill out your term, but you basically you're done. And I was ready to accept the results of that, but Alaskans said no. Most of us didn't participate in this closed primary. My political appeal is not necessarily within the Republican Party. It's a broader constituency, and people were not allowed to participate in that closed primary. So they said, we want a voice in this. And so there was an effort to recruit me for my own write-in campaign, which was a crazy thing to do.
I mean, your last name is not Smith either.
Nine letters.
You have to actually, everyone who was writing in your name had to spell it correctly.
Spell it correctly. And you not only needed to, we not only needed to take an approach to the campaign that says, I'm Lisa, and
Right.
this is what I've done, and this is why I want to continue to serve. But also, how do you actually cast a write-in ballot? Because in Alaska, when you looked at that ballot in 2010, it said, my name was nowhere on it, and there's a line that says write-in, and then there's a bubble right next to it. And so you would have to write in my name. It had to be spelled correctly. And you had to fill in the bubble.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't fill in the bubble, then even though you'd spelled the name right, the machine, the vote counting machine wouldn't catch it. And so we're like, well, how do we, Alaskan voters we think are smart, we think we can teach them how to spell the name, but I mean, we were pretty creative. We had spelling bees and jingles.
You had some great little merch too, right?
Cards. We had merch, we had wristbands, those plastic Livestrong wristbands. But this was one that my husband turned into gold for me afterwards. But
That's
it says,
so cool.
fill it in, write it in,
Yeah,
Lisa
fill it in, there you
Murkowski.
go. That's amazing.
So anyway, it was...
And you won, and you made history, not since Strom Thurmond, right?
Not since 1954 had this happened. So that's the story that everyone said, you've got to write this down. You've got to write a book. And it's like, I'm busy now. I've just been returned. I've got to work. I don't know how to write a book on top of it all. And so he'd try a little bit, and it doesn't happen. And years go by, and the story doesn't go away.
Yes.
And people are like, when are you going to write that book? And so a neighbor from Alaska came to visit me in my office here in Washington, D.C. He'd moved back to New Jersey. And we're chatting, and he's got a political background as well, but he's an author. And he says, you need to write a book. And I said, Charles, I can't write a book. I don't know how to write a book, and I don't have time. And he says, crazy. I write books. I know your whole story. Let's work on this together.
There you go.
The reason it came out now was because if we didn't stop writing the book, we'd still be writing.
Yeah.
Because honest to gosh, everything that's going on right now is like, well, there's another book, there's another book. It's wild out there.
Well, you mentioned the Tea Party, and I wanted to get your thoughts on how you saw the evolution of the Tea Party leading into what we see now in terms of the MAGA movement and Donald Trump.
Well, when you think about it, at that time, this was just when Sarah Palin was really coming onto the scene, and very much a populist political
Alaska.
figure from Alaska, and we kind of saw at that time how people were captivated by a little bit of the kind of the rogue approach. Not your typical conservative, Republican, almost a little libertarian out
populism.
there, and definitely the populist mold.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of, I think, the beginning, and you saw almost the natural connection then between Palin and then ultimately leading into the administration with Trump. Now, but in his first administration as well. And so it was an evolutionary process, but I think we really started to see that come into play in 2010.
And you're very frank in the book that you were no fan of Sarah Palin, and also not a fan of Donald Trump when he came on the scene. In fact, I mean, you say that you maybe regret not speaking out as much against him like someone like Romney did at the time, right? And then, of course, Access Hollywood tapes happen, and you're horrified. How did you, then Trump is elected, and you've got to work with him. Tell the story about how you sort of approached that, and also a great story that you have in the book of your first kind of interaction with him at the White House.
Well, one of the things that I have learned over the years is I have a vote, you have a vote, but then presidents come and presidents go, and you learn to work with each and every one of them. That's my job. My job is to figure out how I'm going to work with a President Obama, with a President Biden, with a President Trump. And some of them are easier than others. Some you've got a different kind of relationship with. And I had been public in stating that when the Access Hollywood tapes came out, I said that Trump should remove himself from the ballot, that he had effectively disqualified himself. And obviously, he didn't step back, and he moved forward, and he prevailed. And I had to figure out how I was going to work with him. And I think one of the things that I recognized was there's going to be some things that we will agree on. So let's work on those. So you mentioned the very first meeting that I had with him. It was actually Senator Sullivan and I went to the White House because we wanted to share Alaska's priorities. And this was in the first 90 days of the first Trump administration. And so you do your homework and you get all your facts about everything that we want to present to him, whether it was resource development up on the North Slope, what more we need to be doing from a military construction perspective. We had the whole kind of
wish list
of everything. And I had heard that the president doesn't really want a lot of facts and figures, so I brought pictures and maps. A lot of maps. I had good maps, and it was a fascinating meeting. It was about a 90-minute long meeting with the president, which is pretty unheard of. But it was because he was so curious with all this, and so we're talking about the North Slope, and he says, "Well, tell me about the polar bears. Tell me about the polar bears that are up there." And it's like, well, actually, it is a real problem because you have workers who need to go out in the oil fields, and polar bears are not friendly. They're not like the Coca-Cola polar bear out there. They're like lethal, and you have a cage thing around the exit door so that you can actually go out and be protected. Or in the communities, you have somebody whose job it is to make sure that the coast is clear in the morning before the kids go to school. And so they post on Facebook, it's all clear, there's no polar bear. And he was captivated by this.
Sure, he took all that in,
We go running down all kinds of rabbit trails with bears and whales and how big halibut are and the moose and our moose more. It was just kind of fun. We did get a lot of good policy initiatives covered, but it was a reminder to me, okay, I'm going to have to approach this relationship in a different way than I would with, say, for instance, President Obama, who wanted to know, give me the details. How many jobs is this? How much revenue is created? And so you try to figure it out. From that first meeting, we have had a relationship that is, I guess I would use the word cautious sometimes.
Okay.
He made no pretense of liking me when I was up for re-election. He campaigned against me.
He threatened to do it, and he did it.
He threatened to do it. In fact, what he said was, he says, "I'm not sure where I'm going to be in 2022, but I can tell you, if I'm going to be in Alaska to campaign for anybody who has a pulse, who will run against Lisa Murkowski." Well, they actually ran a pretty fair candidate, and anyway.
But you survived.
Long story short,
you survived
I'm still
that
here.
one. Yeah.
I was voting today, so I survived.
You survived that. But talk about some of those tough moments where you had to go against the White House. You had to, for example, you were one of the few senators that voted for impeachment, to convict on impeachment. You had the Justice Kavanaugh vote. Talk about how you came to those decisions and what you weighed when you did that at what could have been a serious political expense.
Well, and this is where this is where the book gives a lot of just how I try to process
Right.
through some really hard things. And ultimately for me, it comes down to how does this impact the people that I serve back home? And knowing that, for instance, a good example of this is Senator McCain is very well known for having cast his thumbs down vote on the ACA. Susan Collins and I had already voted no against that. That was a vote that was there was a lot of political pressure there. But for me, this was a matter that the impact to people in Alaska in terms of access and cost of care was just so much that it was almost an easy vote in that way because it was so apparent on its face the negative implications for the state. And so you just say that there's political cost, most certainly, but my responsibility is not to be on this perpetual quest to be reelected. My responsibility is to make hard decisions for the people that I serve and try to do right by those decisions. And so for me, on impeachment, there was 2 impeachments that we went through. On the first one, the articles of impeachment that came out from the House, they hadn't made their case. And as one who has a legal background, who practiced law, it's like, if you're charging documents, just don't hold up here. They don't hold up. On the second one, after January 6th, there was no question. There was no question in my mind. There was no question in my mind that what we had seen was an insurrection. What we had seen was a president who failed to honor his oath of office, which is to protect and defend the Constitution and the people. And I felt he had failed in that. And so that one was one. There will be political consequence to that, and believe me, I hear that from folks back home, Republicans who say, I can't believe that you voted to impeach the president. And my resolve in why I cast that vote and how I can hold my head up in doing so, I don't waver on that. But I think what you really, when the votes are the hard ones, what really comes down to is, how is this impacting the people that I serve? And if it means Alaskans don't like it and they're going to vote against me, that's the consequence.
And for example, recently, you were kind of the deciding vote on the big, beautiful bill because you held out for some Alaskan sweeteners along the way, right? You were able to negotiate from a perspective of getting something for your state at the end of the day, right?
And this was a perfect example when a reconciliation bill is coming at the first of a new administration, when you have one party that controls all the levers. There is no doubt, there should be no doubt in anybody's mind, but that a reconciliation bill is going to pass. You have a Republican president, a Republican Senate, and a Republican House. A bill was going to pass. And so we looked at it carefully. I didn't like what the House had passed in terms of the really the gutting of so much of Medicaid. And so when we were looking at what is this going to look like coming out of the Senate, how can we shape this in a way that is going to actually be helpful to Alaska? And so there are many provisions in it that are helpful, particularly on the resource side, but everything from the investments in the Coast Guard to some of the energy provisions that we were able to incorporate. But when it came to SNAP and to Medicaid, this was where it was it was really, really hard because we had worked to soften a great deal of the impact, to provide for longer time periods for implementation, for instance, to get complete waivers for work requirements for Medicaid and SNAP. When you have whole areas where you have no economies, so many of our communities, work requirements are almost laughable because you live a subsistence lifestyle.
Right.
How does harvesting wood off of the Yukon River to saw and cut up to give to the elders, how does that constitute work requirements? And so we were able to make significant changes to Alaskans' benefit. But I was, even towards the end, I'm like, it's not enough. We're still going to get hit hard, even with the $50 billion in this rural health transformation. It's going to be significant. It's going to help us, but it still is hard, particularly as we're looking now at some of these impacts that we're seeing. You've got the ACA enhanced premiums that are expiring. You've got the shutdown and the impact on SNAP, and this is heavy on me. But I also realized that if I were not working to try to make things better for the people that I serve, just as easily as a conversation you and I are having here, the White House, the leadership would have gone to the next senator over and said,
what can we do for you?
What can we do for you?
Yeah.
And believe you me, they would have taken
Rand
the
Paul.
provisions
Yeah.
that we had incorporated to not only help Alaska, but for instance, on some of these SNAP provisions. These were states that were all in the same bucket in terms of meeting the I'm drawing a blank on the error rate. There's a term for it, but anyway. So there were multiple other states that benefited from it, but still, it was a hard one. But it came down to, at the end of the day, our Alaskans benefited more by what we have been able to incorporate.
When you've had to take some of these politically courageous votes like impeachment, Kavanaugh, when you reflect on your time in the Senate and you think about your colleagues, how do you see sort of maybe the lack of courage on some of them to kind of take those tough votes? How do you, do you feel like people are putting their party above maybe what they need to when they are just blindly following an administration?
I think the simple answer on that is yes.
Yeah.
I feel that we have moved as a Congress, as a Senate. When I came to the Senate, there was so much working back and forth. We didn't talk a lot about bipartisanship because we just did it.
Right.
And it's not to say that it's gone, but the divide between the parties is so much greater now than it has been. And this polarization, I think, is really hurting us to the point where you use your party for cover instead of thinking through the issue and how it impacts your state. And again, whether it's substantive legislation like the ACA or for the Healthy Forest Act, whatever it may be, we're seeing people reflexively align with their party in a way that I think perhaps gives cover, but takes away your responsibility to be looking at these matters in a way that is perhaps more inclusive. Every one of us, I don't care if you're in the bluest of blue states and you are a hardcore Democrat, you've got Republicans in your state that maybe you might want to listen to. In Alaska, we've got folks of all different political persuasions. I think, and it's really hard for me to say, you should have more political courage, you should stand up, you should separate from the party, because we all come to this a little bit different. My base, if you will, is so different than you know, a Republican from, say, Arkansas or Ohio. The folks who have returned me to the Senate they're Republicans, they're Democrats, they are independents, they are nonpartisans, they are Greens, they're Libertarians. It is a very eclectic group of people who've said, we expect that you're kind of listening to all of us here and not just your party. So I'm not quite sure how we dial it back, how we take some of the power that we have, like, just ceded to the parties. We don't have closed primaries in Alaska anymore. We changed that
to ranked choice voting, right?
We opened up the primaries and we moved to ranked choice. Ranked choice is, some would say it's confusing. I don't think that there's anything confusing about saying, well, I want to have I want to use the blue crayon, but if I don't have blue, I'm going to go with green. And if I don't have green, I can figure out I'm just going to do it in red. I mean, this is not hard. We do it every single day. But one of the things that we've really seen in Alaska that has allowed for just less partisanship and more focused on what are we going to do for the broader good is when we opened up the primaries, what we're having now is we're seeing candidates come forward that can get elected across the entire spectrum instead of you have a closed primary, the most conservative candidate wins or the most liberal candidate wins, and then they go into the general and they're not able to pass muster with the broader electorate, and so we get some interesting configurations.
Right, and then that kind of creates the situation where you're team red or team blue, and you just vote for whatever team you're on, right? As opposed to finding the middle.
You. They say,
right.
We voted for you. We as Republicans vote for you. You have to be accountable to us. And that's maybe where I feel like I come to the table with more what you might call political freedom, in the sense that when I was returned to the Senate in 2010, I was not returned by the Republican Party. There was a Republican candidate who went forward, and I went up against him in the general, but he was the Republican. I was Lisa.
Yeah.
I was Lisa with no initial after it. And so I've kept that, and I wear this bracelet just as a reminder as to kind of the great compilation of amazing Alaskans who said, I want you to stay back there and go to work again.
Yeah.
And it's not, so I don't feel like I have the same allegiance to a party who put me in place in the first place.
It's a freeing kind of thing.
I think it is. And maybe if others had it, maybe we would see some
I want to put a plug in
differences.
on this issue of ranked choice voting, because next Wednesday, the 29th, we are doing a screening here of the documentary Majority Rules.
Oh, it's a great one.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is terrific.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a panel discussion about it as well. So you should have gotten a flyer when you came in. So we'll hope anybody who's interested in learning more about how it works, what the ramifications are, will come out next Wednesday for that. But when we think about women too, do you think it opens the door more for female candidates as well as more moderates as well?
I do. I think it really opens up opportunities for those who are not your typical candidate with the perfect resume. So whether you are a woman, young person, somebody who doesn't have great personal wealth, you're not going to be able to fund your campaign yourself. And so it really does allow for wider participation, I think, which I think is healthy.
It is.
I think it's,
yeah.
I think it's good. And we're seeing that outcome. We're seeing it in Alaska. So we've had ranked choice now since 2022 was the first implementation of it. But not only did we see just new people jumping into the arena for the first time, didn't necessarily mean that they won, but they were able to be a participant in this process. But what we've seen in our legislature is, I think, really compelling. We have now coalition government in our state legislature. We actually have more Republicans in our state House. In the state Senate, it's split 50-50, but the coalitions, you have a Republican and a Democrat. So your president might be the Republican, and the head of your finance committee is Democrat, and it's coalition
and everybody
government.
has to work together.
Everybody is working together.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is we've gotten great opposition from the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, because it's threatening to them. It's threatening because they're going to lose the controls that they have in terms of who is fed up through that
It's
primary
all about
system.
the power
How
dynamic.
do we endorse them? How do we get money to them? So it's threatening to them, but it is something that as we're seeing pushback now in the state of Alaska about why we need to get rid of it, I hear, well, it's totally designed to stack the deck for Democrats. And what I remind them is just look at the results in 2022. They returned Mary Peltola, a Democrat. They returned a moderate Republican, but they returned a very conservative Republican governor. All the same electorate, with very different outcomes here. And so it is interesting. I think it's about giving more power to the electorate, giving more power to people, to the people, and empowering people who are not would not otherwise be predisposed to run for office.
I wanted to get your thoughts on how you think about empowering young women to run for office. You were obviously the first female elected senator from Alaska, but you write in your book, you were the number 32, only the 32nd female to serve in the Senate out of 2,000 plus over our history, which is crazy, right? Yeah. And so how do you think about encouraging young women to make runs for office, especially in this, extreme climate that we are living in right now? Because it's not easy.
It's not easy, and what I tell anybody who's interested is, don't wait for the perfect moment, because I think we all think we have to wait until I have the perfect resume, until I've had this work experience, I've had that internship, I've put that title on, or I have to gotta have a family. I have to
my kids are too young. My kids are
too young or too old. Now I'm in the midst of my career. Well, now I need to be thinking about retirement. There will never, ever, ever be a good time to run for political office. There just isn't, because it is a service, and you need to be prepared to give that service. And so it means that you've got to push everything else to around. You don't push it away. Your family doesn't go away. Oftentimes that career part of it does, but you have to figure out how I'm going to just do more with the few hours I have in every single day. And
women are pretty good at that.
Women can juggle lots of balls in the airs, and I remind them of that.
Yes.
That you're naturally predisposed to this. But I think one of the things that intimidates women is the fundraising. It's the fundraising, and it's the kind of the self-promotion.
Yes.
We joke. So the women of the Senate, are a pretty good group of women, and we haven't done it recently, but we used to have some pretty regular dinners where the women would just get together, have dinner, maybe share a glass of wine, share stories, not be talking business, but just getting to know one another as women. And we joke sometimes about, man, the men that we work with have such big egos. They have no problem going out and self-promoting because that's just what they do. And we talk about how oftentimes it really is hard to talk about yourself in a way that kind of helps people understand what you do bring to the table, because it feels boastful or bragging. And you know what? You've just got to get over that. That's hard to do. I still am a lousy job at that. I can promote you, Betsy, all day long, but I have a harder time. And I think that's part of it. And knowing how to fundraise and supporting other women in doing this, I think that those are important aspects.
What about sort of this, the toxicity we see in politics, political violence? That seems to be a big deterrent as well.
It is.
How do you talk to
That's
women
harder.
about that? Yeah.
That's harder because you can't say, don't worry.
Right.
It's not real.
Right.
Because we see that it's real, and it's not only real in Congress, but we're seeing it in far too many facets. Some are saying, is it even safe to run for school board anymore? And that's a real tragedy, because that's not who we are. That's not where we should be. But I say when it comes to just the toxic environment, the only way that you can work to address it is to engage in it and try to bring down the temperature. Don't engage in the amped up rhetoric. Don't engage in the trash talking, and try to elevate the conversation. But it is really, really hard. It's really hard right now.
Yeah. And you also write candidly in the book, because you mentioned, thinking about children and balance and life. You write candidly about, when you came up to Washington, your children were younger. It was hard.
It was awful. I mean, it was hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's kind of like, I don't know, for any of you that have had children out there, there's kind of an amnesia that sets in after childbirth, and then you forget how hard that was, and you go and have another child. And
You have two boys.
I have two boys, and they're super great. But it was really hard in those early years because they were young. My oldest was just going into high school, and my youngest was in middle school. And for the first 2 years that I was back here, my husband and the boys were not with me. And so I did this crazy commute back and forth between here and
It's not like
Alaska.
you were on the Acela. You were going all the way back to Alaska.
And it's 12 hours and 4-hour time difference, and then you just kind of flip and you turn around. And it was hard on everybody. I'm really proud of my husband and my boys for giving me the support and the space that I needed. But you're always wrestling with, am I doing enough for my family? Am I a good enough mom? Am I a good enough wife? Am I a good enough senator? And so you just double down on everything, to the point where it's just hard. You get kind of on autopilot. They moved back here after 2 years, and that made it much, much easier. But then I wasn't at home.
You're busy.
And my heart is at home.
Right.
And so, it is, public service is always going to be hard. And I think it's harder for those that are trying to raise families and balance it all. When they say you can have it all, I think there are things that have to slide. In the book, I joke about it a little bit, but I realized I just had to give up on the laundry. So there are some things
kind of
that
pick your battles on what you're gonna.
yeah.
But I mean, your first chapter in your book is called "The Reluctant Senator," because you really had to be persuaded to take this job on, and it came from sort of an unlikely person, your father.
Everything that I've done in my political life is like practically crazy.
He was
why
a
we had
U.S.
to write this
senator.
book.
Yeah, he was a U.S. senator. He left his term with 2 years left to become the governor of Alaska. He has a short list of people to appoint to fill out his term, and all of a sudden you're on the short list, and you don't want to be.
I don't want to be. I
You
wanna
were
be so
a House
far
member.
away.
You were a member of the state legislature
I was in the
Alaska.
state legislature, and I had a pretty good career, great reputation going in. I just been was going to be the majority leader there, and I had everything that I wanted and needed, and was not interested in being a United States Senator. I'd seen my dad in the job as he had done this crazy back and forth and dealt with just hard issues. And so, yeah, this was not something that I sought. And it's hard. It's still to this day, all these years later, it's hard to talk about it because people are like, of course, anybody who would have an opportunity to be a senator, you would jump in a heartbeat. And maybe I knew enough about what went into the job because I had observed my dad for so long. It was like, not for me. But it came down to, and it's what we were talking about earlier, is how you can best serve. And if you, as I recognized that I did.
And that's how he got to you too, right?
Oh,
you know,
it was
what
totally
you can
unfair.
do for,
It was totally unfair in that regards. But it came down to can I serve the state in a better capacity, and am I able to do it? Yes, I'm able to do it. Do I have the support to do it? And that was where my husband and the boys came in.
We're going to take some questions, so if anyone has some questions, we'll get a mic over to you. And let me just ask you, though, speaking of that, you've got now another 3 years, I guess, left in your term now. What are your thoughts on running again? Would you want to be governor, serve the state that way? What are your thoughts for your political future?
So I'm not going to make any great announcements here tonight at American University. Sorry about that. I keep telling people, look, I've got 3 more years in this term, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But I have been asked if I would be interested in serving as governor, and because it's about my state, it is something that I have given thought to. But I've got a lot of time to weigh that as an option. But it is something that I recognize. I've done some pretty significant public service over the years, and I still feel like I'm young, but there's so much talent. There's so many great young people who need to know that there is room to rise. And so the idea of staying in office for too long, where's that opportunity for that next generation of strong leaders that we need to encourage?
And are you worried about losing some of the other more moderates out of the U.S. Senate? So many have departed already. Tom Tillis is leaving, Joni Ernst is leaving. I mean, this has got to be weigh on you as well, right?
Well, the Senate clearly has changed over the years. It clearly has changed. And I wish that I could say that we are growing the middle, but it's become more challenging. And some good people are timing out. I respect that. I've tried to convince them to change their mind. But you do recognize it's hard, and the political environment, as the book says, can be a bit extreme at time. You've got to have the energy to do this. You have to have the passion and the purpose. And this goes back, and then we'll take the question here, but it goes back to encouraging women, or anybody who's looking to run for office, if you are passionate about something, you can take on hard things. If you know what your purpose is, and it's not about you, it's about something bigger than you, you can take on a lot.
That's good advice for politics or anything.
Everything.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question. Yes. Hi.
Okay,
Want to introduce
hi.
yourself?
Okay, my name's Kim. Thank you so much for coming today and speaking with us after I'm sure that it was a busy day. So thank you so much for your time. And you're very personable, so I want to commend you on that. You're very relatable, so thank you so much. Okay, so my question is, and this is the first time I think I had ever heard about you or knew who you were. So you very publicly condemned the big, beautiful bill and then ended up voting for it. Can you discuss what ultimately led to that decision? And then the follow-up to that is, do you feel that most Republican politicians face pressure to blindly support Trump or face repercussions from MAGA voters? And in this conversation, you had commented on that. Well, I don't like blindly support him, but do you feel that a lot of politicians are facing that pressure increasingly? Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I think we hit on a lot of the commentary on the big beautiful bill and the reconciliation and kind of where I came down on that. But again, there's some very strong provisions in the bill as they relate to Alaska's economy, specifically on the energy and resource development. That was compelling. And not only that, some of the matters, I think I also mentioned Coast Guard was significant for us. Some of the tax provisions as well. But my big effort and initiative was to try to make the provisions as they related to Medicaid less harmful to the most vulnerable. And we did that in some significant ways. When we started this, there was no Rural Health Transformation Fund. There was nothing to offset the impact to Medicaid on some of these hospitals. And so I think as we see that going forward, some of the real anxiety and the concerns we'll be able to ameliorate that. I have never suggested to anybody that we got the bill to a perfect place, probably not even a good place in some of the areas on Medicaid, but we got it to a better place. So as far as political pressure, I'm gonna be careful with my words here, because there's a couple kinds of pressure. I mean, pressure is when you're kind of threatened. Pressure is when you've got peer pressure coming at you. Pressure is when for instance, if you're desperate in your state to be endorsed by Trump because it's going to make or break you. And in some of the really red states, man, if you don't have his endorsement, you're going to be political roadkill in your next election. And so there's that kind of pressure that you put on yourself. But I do think that there is kind of the pressure to, quote, stay in line, be the faithful Republican, be the loyal Trump supporter. And I think that is very, very real. And I'm not, again, making any news when I share that President Trump, if he doesn't like you, if he doesn't think you've been sufficiently loyal, he is not hesitant to call you out. He is not hesitant to give you a name. And I'm okay with that. I mean,
but what about other institutions where it's maybe not okay? Threatening universities, threatening law firms. I mean, how do you come down on that?
Well, and this is where we've entered a different world.
Yes.
I operate in a world of politics and different kinds of political pressure. But I think what we're seeing now is using the leverage that comes from president, being the office of the White House, on institutions that have never had that level of political pressure. What we're seeing here in our universities to basically align your policies to what I say.
Or else.
Or else.
Yeah.
Or else in a pretty dramatic fashion. And so we're seeing this, some may say, well, this is deal making, but this is, I'm not subscribing to that. I think we're seeing political pressures on institutions in ways that we have never seen before. I had a meeting this afternoon talking with some folks on the Federal Reserve Board. This is an independent board. It has to be in order for us to have the trust in the decisions coming out of it. And I can tell you the political pressure that they receive is untoward. So we're seeing things at a level and directed in areas that I think are unprecedented and I think are wrong.
And I think people will say, well, why isn't anyone standing up to that? Where is Congress? Where is Congress now that the East Wing of the White House has been chopped off, right? Where is it? I mean, where is that checks and balances?
And here's, I guess I can just give you one senator's kind of response. For instance, I take it back to the Federal Reserve. About a month ago, there was a vacancy on the board, and the president said he wanted to appoint an individual who was an economist, has a background, okay, but that individual is also the chairman of the president's economic advisors, and he is still on as the chairman of the president's economic advisors in that capacity full time. And so he was going to be dual-hatted. The Fed has to, I believe, is independent and unbiased, and you have to be untethered from the executive branch. And he did not step down from that position. I opposed him. I believe I was the only Republican that opposed
Probably.
him. But I was shocked
Yeah.
that it would not be recognized that if we're going to demand a level of independence from an institution like the Federal Reserve Board, that we would allow, as Republicans, this perception of a conflict. And there was acquiescence to what the White House wanted. They're like, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. We should not accept that, because now what happens is the Federal Reserve Board is being viewed as, oh, now how partisan have they become?
Right, how do we trust that?
How do we trust that?
Or gathering basic jobs data,
yes.
right?
Yes.
I mean,
we don't like the jobs
so
data,
we get rid of the person.
We get rid of
and
the
how do we ever
head.
trust that?
We don't. I mean, what we're seeing in my view, is an erosion of some of the fundamentals that keep our institutions supported. And I see this first and foremost in the legislative branch. We have specific Article I powers. It's pretty clear. Read the Constitution. It says the Congress has the power on taxing and spending. And so whether it is, Congress has the power to declare war. So if we're going to be taking out narco-terrorists in the Caribbean Sea and
Right.
calling this an armed conflict with using lethal power, Congress has a role here. Congress has a role with tariffs. It's not left entirely to the president, but the president just can't declare emergency authority over everything and say Congress has no role. What we're seeing with pocket rescissions, it's basically taking the funding that Congress has authorized and appropriated to and said, sorry, going to take that one off the table because we don't necessarily agree with that. That's our constitutional role, and we're not seeing enough members standing up and saying, hands off, executive branch. You've got your authorities over there. We've got ours over here. And I've told people, I've told my good friends, you can be 100% supporter of Trump. You can be MAGA all you want, but you still can respect the role of the legislative branch, the role
The checks
of the
and
courts,
balances that happen, yeah.
the checks and balances that have been in play. And when we lose that, we lose the underpinnings of what this country was built on.
Should Trump have had to seek congressional approval to build his ballroom and take down the East Wing of the White House?
Well,
I mean, people are shocked about that.
And we're shocked about a lot of things.
Yeah.
I remember we were shocked about the plane from Qatar, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Is it just so much out there that it's just drinking out of a fire hose at some point?
Here's the role that Congress would play with the East Ballroom.
Yeah.
Is if that overhaul, because I don't call it a renovation, was done at taxpayer expense. But he has made this a public opportunity for donations.
You could also argue an ethical situation of that as well, right?
Yes, does it buy access
Yes.
to the White House? I mean,
Yeah.
it
I
does
mean, if
cause you to
Amazon
question
is
that.
the
Yeah.
Amazon East Wing ballroom, I mean,
Yeah. You're making fun of that, but it's not
I
so
know
funny.
it's not funny
so
at all, but it just
Yeah.
it continues to happen. And I think people like you speaking out, but we don't see the rest of.
We need more
Yeah.
to not only to speak out, and this is where
This is why we need you to stay in the Senate.
I'll go a little off script here.
Yeah.
You know, some of my friends in the Republican conference are, you know, this whole no kings, why all these people protesting. I actually think protest is healthy. Obviously, you want it to be safe.
Sure.
You need it to be safe.
Sure.
But if people don't speak up, then your elected leaders think everything's okay, that it's okay.
Yeah.
And so how can there be that good, healthy outlet for
Yeah.
that?
a good
And
point.
so people speaking out, I would like to think, encourages your elected representatives to also speak out. So I'm not afraid when we
Yeah.
have the good, solid protests. We had some very, very animated, but people were having a good
Yeah.
time. Anyway,
This young man has been very patient here.
I'm sorry.
We'll give you a question, and then we'll probably wrap it up.
Thank you both for taking my question. So, Senator Murkowski, I know you've been asked this and probably will be for God knows how long, the fiscal year 2025 bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill. So in that bill, there was the creation of a national educational income tax credit. And that program won't be actually started until 2027, January 2027, I believe. And that program is essentially going to give the states a program which they can opt into, which can help them pay for low-income private school vouchers for children. And I understand that Alaska has a program like that, Pennsylvania has a program like that. And you've made it a point during your time in the Senate to advocate for public education. You've made statements about how since Alaska has a very low amount of private schools, and the fact that there's many rural areas that don't have great access to education, that they need to be protected. So you voted for the One Big Beautiful Bill. Did you have any discussion about this piece of legislation? Did you have any reservations about how the bill would affect education, specifically public education?
Yeah, I'm on the Health, Education, Labor, Pensions Committee, and so the provisions related to education, we had an opportunity to engage in. This is an area where, believe me, the effort to go much further with true vouchers for private schools. There are some in the conference who felt very strongly about that and in moving that in that direction. As you noted, I am a strong proponent of public education. Want to make sure that a parent has a level of school choice, but I happen to believe that we can make that school choice available in our public schools. If we do it in Alaska, we can do it everywhere else. It just requires the commitment to do this. The tax credit that you're speaking of would allow for the parent to be able to get a deduction from as an education credit, I believe as an education credit for what they pay for their child to go to a private school. It is not, we didn't go to voucher. In Alaska, we can't, our constitution, our state's constitution has a specific provision that does not allow for any level of public support on the state side to go to private education. It's called the Blaine Amendment. There are efforts in our legislature right now to get rid of that because our state is going a little more conservative in this way on education specifically. I don't think it's going to happen, but if that were to go into place, it would have impacts on us in this state as well. We talk about the commitment to public education, but our reality is that if we do not fund it, we're going to get the education outcomes that we're not going to be happy with. And it is expensive, and I think we get that. But as a taxpayer, I'm fine paying to make sure that my kids can get a quality education in a public school. My kids, before they came back here to Washington, D.C., went to a Title I school in Anchorage, Alaska. Title I, so it's lower income, and we had as quality an education, in my view, in that Title I school as they did in any private parochial school in town. So I've seen how we can make it work, but we've got to put resources to it, and we're not doing it. I hear your concern that we're kind of like we're kind of nose under the tent, and I think you're right, but what I will share with you is that that whole camel could have gotten under there and didn't. Maybe not a very satisfactory answer, but that's kind of what we were faced with where we were going with the reconciliation bill. Thank you. I appreciate your question.
I want to let everybody know that we have the books for sale right outside the door, and the senators agreed to stay for maybe 10 minutes and sign a few, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I want to thank Lauren Costello from SPA Events and Maylin Lee from our team at WPI for their help in coordinating everything tonight. Thank you, ladies, and thank you, Senator,
Thank
so
you for the
much for being
conversation.
here.
I
We
appreciate
really
it.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you. That was fun.
Thank you. It was really nice.